Ladies and gentlemen, it is official. Fortnite Chapter 1 is making a return 6 years after its original release. OG weapons, OG POIs, and OG seasons are all coming back for 1 month as some kind of blast from the past before the next chapter begins. Kato Thorn, the incredibly evil vampire dude, has been scheming and is planning a heist from Chapter 1 Season 5. But for whatever reason, it doesn't work out and the entire island will go back in time and we are going to relive the events of Chapter 1 at a rapid pace. Leaks suggest that the loot pool and map will constantly change to reflect different seasons from Chapter 1 until ultimately we end up going into Chapter 5, whether it be through the same black hole from Season X or other means. Those of you who watched my Fracture video will know that my opinion on annual chapters is very negative, but I will admit that all of these leaks and rumors have got me quite excited. I don't think I've ever been as pumped for a new season as I am for this next one, and not just because of it being Chapter 1. It's also because of the potential that all of this has to save the storyline and fill the game with new life. Chapter 4 Season 4 has already been doing that, claiming the spot as my new favorite season since Chapter 3 Season 1. But the beginning of Chapter 5 could truly rival the likes of Chapter 2 Season 2 and Chapter 1 Season 5 for the best season of all time, if they do it right. We could also very well end up with another Fracture. So, I don't want to call any shots yet, but the future is finally looking bright. So, what does all this actually mean for the game? It could be the glorious return of one of the best times in video game history, or it may just end up being a lazy attempt at fan service. I'm going to use this video to discuss the best way I think Epic could pull this off so that it goes down in history, and what they should avoid in order to not recreate this. Without further ado, let's get into it. It goes without saying that the return of Fortnite Chapter 1 will bring thousands if not millions of players back to the game. However, whether or not they stick around for more than a few days will very much depend on how the entire thing is handled. The easy solution would be to just redo all the seasons as they were, with the only difference being how quickly everything happened. This would include switching up the weapons, items, and locations every few days to simulate the original experience. This would eventually end the same way, with the black hole destroying the island, except maybe this time something changes and we are sent to Chapter 5 instead of Chapter 2. I don't think doing it this way would be necessarily bad, as it's the most one-to-one way that it could be handled, but at the same time I think that Epic could do much better. The first thing that I think would improve this would be live events. I'm not sure how simple it would be to remake all of the live events in the newer graphic engines, but imagine how incredible it would be to see all of the Chapter 1 events again. Especially because I wasn't able to watch most of them live, it would be a great experience to finally get to see the monster versus robot fight and the rocket launch in real time. Imagine we had like a different event that would happen once a week. This would keep the hype strong all the way through the season. Now, this next thing might be a bit controversial, but I would love to see the new mechanics that were introduced later be implemented into this throwback season. I'm talking about mantling, sprinting, and sliding. Some people think that these would ruin the nostalgic feeling of the Chapter 1 map, but after playing the Creative 2.0 remakes that came out earlier this year, I would have to disagree. Playing without these mechanics after having them for so long was extremely jarring and made me not want to continue playing. Glitchiness of the maps aside, it felt extremely slow and limiting to play without being able to sprint and mantle. I don't know how many of you actually go back and watch videos from the first 2 chapters, but let me tell you, it is painful to see how slow the game is compared to now. I think removing them just because they weren't a part of the game would also imply removing a lot of other quality of life improvements we've had since then as well. We didn't have things like preferred item slots or edit on release until Chapter 2, but I would be shocked to see Epic remove them in this throwback season. I know I'm comparing gameplay mechanics to settings here, but for me, these mechanics are basically quality of life improvements as well, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to remove them. Another good reason to not remove sprinting, sliding, and mantling ties in along with my next idea, which would be rewriting the story on the Chapter 1 island so that it continues the Chapter 4 storyline.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Okay, hear me out for a second. I don't mean completely ditching the previous storyline with the Cube and the Ice King and all that. If things were slightly altered to where the same big events happened, only slightly differently to incorporate more of Kato Thorn and Sloan and the other characters, I think it could spice up the experience in a cool new way. As good as the Chapter 1 story was, I don't think seeing everything happen in exactly the same way as before would be the best path to take. Besides, the story has to go somewhere after the throwback ends, and if we just repeat everything that happened before, then it might be a little bit weird. Maybe Kato steals important things from the live events and then they play out differently. For example, imagine he steals a vital piece from the mech and it breaks during the fight with the monster. The entire thing would play out differently, and then maybe the 0 Point has to destroy the monster to save itself, and in doing so it creates a Season X that is wildly different than before. Dang, Epic should really hire me as a writer. But you see what I mean, right? Wouldn't something like that be way more interesting than just doing the same story again? We would still get to play the OG map and use the OG weapons, but the story that is told could be unique and lead up to a new chapter in an awesome way. Which leads me to my next point, which is that there needs to be a finale event. If we don't see all the old events again, I mean that's fine, but there needs to be a grand finale event to tie everything off and bring in the new chapter. If they choose to play the story out the same, or even with tweaks, the big thing that will change the map into the next chapter will be the end event. Originally, we had the 7 send the meteor into the 0 point and create a black hole, which eventually led us into Chapter 2. But this time, something different will happen. Maybe since the 7 are like technically dead or chromed or something in our timeline, Rip Dwayne, someone else tries to stabilize the 0 point and it explodes in a different way. I think that ideally, it doesn't create a black hole, but instead destroys or changes a lot of the island. You remember all those concepts from back in the day of a Chapter 1 Season 11? That's what I'm sort of imagining here. Except that most of the old map is altered and we get the Chapter 5 map with some OG locations and terrain mixed in with it. Although, I can't deny that getting a completely fresh map is always nice, and having the new map just be a base of the old map would be a little bit lame. Either way, I would be satisfied with how they choose to do the new map, as long as the event is better than this one. Now I wanted to talk a little about what Epic needs to avoid in order to not make this a boring and uninspired bit of fan service. The first big thing that they need to avoid is having absolutely no live events. If all of the story is done through cutscenes, I will actually lose my mind. This was my biggest complaint with Fracture because all the cool stuff happened during the opening cutscene and then all we got to do was walk around for 45 minutes collecting useless fragments. We need an amazing event that reminds the community that Fortnite is the king of live events because it's been almost an entire year since the last one. And it was a bad one too. If you haven't figured it out already, I hate the Fracture event. The next thing that Fortnite absolutely cannot do is ruin our memory of Chapter 1. Revisiting something from the past is a special opportunity, and it should not be abused and ruined in the long term for more attention in the short term. Sometimes games or movies do this by creating a remastered or modern version of an older entry, but change certain things that just make it worse and destroy the memories that the fans had for it before. Some things are just better off not being remade, and while I don't necessarily think the Chapter 1 map is included in that list, Epic needs to be really careful to not ruin the good times and nostalgia that we all have for the island. But whatever Fortnite ends up doing, I know it'll be awesome and won't disappoint. This is something the Fortnite fans have been looking forward to for years, and this will probably be the only time it ever happens in an official way. Let me know down in the comments how you think the storyline of the season will play out, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. I've been Blitzblock, and thanks for watching. Peace out.